Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel, because in this episode I'm going to be making a sawhorse. Okay, so you want to make yourself a sawhorse. Now there's two general types that I've seen on the net when I wanted to look up stuff on YouTube, see how I could make one. There's the American version, which is the I-beam style. That's where they get 3 bits of wood like that in a shape of an eye, and then they put the legs down there and they just screw them in. Mostly American construction workers use that type because it's quick, it's easy, but it's not that strong in my opinion, because it's only temporary. Because when that piece of wood goes on there, there's a big gap in here. So again, if you're just after a quick sawhorse for one job, it's a good way of doing it because you can pull it apart and reuse that timber. The other way of doing it is the British way of doing it, which has a lot of complex angles and joinery and cutting, and you can make it like that if you're a master carpenter, but just for hobbyists and everyday folks like us, it's all too complicated. And I wanted something a little bit more permanent. I wanted something that was a little in between both of those methods. So I've come up with a unique way of making a sawhorse, which I'm going to call the TBeam. It's not quite an I-beam, but it allows you to get the leg up against and screwed into this upright piece that forms the upright part of the T. So we'll show you how to go ahead and make one of those right now. Most construction timber, and this is pine, has lots of knots in it, and so it's not that strong. The knots are a weak point. What I'm looking for on the top of my piece is to have 900 millimeters of clear wood. I've looked through the 2 pieces of wood, and this piece here is just long enough for me to get a clear piece on the top of my wood, so I'm going to measure this and cut it off now. Chop that end bit off. We'll go to 880. Actually, we'll go a tiny bit over, because then we'll trim it down after. Margin for error. Just say 883, something like that. Okay, cool. That is going to form the top of our sawhorse. Okay, so the next very simple thing to do is to centralize the part that becomes the T into the middle of the top. You just do that with your thumbs. You just feel along like that until you know it's in the center, like that. This isn't a critical measurement. You put them in there like that. That's roughly in the center. Take a pencil and strike a line along each side, like that. With your pencil, take it off, and with your 2 pencil marks, now we're going to drill some holes. We're going to do this upside down, because once it's up the right way, you're not really going to know where that bottom piece is, but if we pre-drill it, you'll be able to screw straight through it, and that's why I do it that way. We're going to need a 3mm drill bit, which is in the house. Ready to go. Okay, so we've marked out the top piece now. It's upside down. I'm going to drill 5 holes in it for the 5 screws that are going to come in through the top. So I'm just going to get one right in the centre, both in the centre of that and equidistant from the end, and just drill a hole. Make sure that comes all the way through. That's good. Now I'm going to drill one a few inches in from the end, in the centre. Same on the other end. Now I'm going to drill a hole in between those 2 and in between those 2. So that's the 5 holes. Done. The next thing to do is to simply apply some glue to that joint, put the T-piece on and screw it in from the other side. Okay, so the holes have been drilled, we're ready to go. All I've got to do now is apply a little bit of glue. This is just white glue, it's nothing flash or fancy. Just apply a little dab all the way along, like that. Take our T-piece and just just rub it up and down a bit to smear the glue around. Take our two little spaces to ensure we're in the right spot. Just have a look. Yes, we are. Nice. Then we take some clampage, we put these F-clamps on. And this is just to hold it in place while we do the screwing, because when you put that glue on there, it's going to be skiing around all over the place. That's what I've found over time. So on with the clamps. One on that end, one on the other end. That's moved a little bit, we'll move him over. Now we're just flipping upside down. Now I can just take my battery drill and I always start off in the centre, because that allows it to pivot a little bit if it's a little bit out of whack. Now, as long as they've gone down a little bit below surface level, you're good as gold. Then I'll put the next two in, one on each side. I do it that way because the clamps are covering up those final two holes, but that's now solid. It's triangulated now. It can't move left or right. So we can take our clamps off and replace them with some screws. And that's our top made in the T-beam construction style, my unique design. All we've got to do now is put 4 legs on it. Okay, so first of all, we're going to have to make 4 legs. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the base of the leg to 15 degrees. All of the angles on these sawhorses are 15 degrees. Keep it as easy as possible, nothing too complex. So the first thing we need to do is cut it down on the first one. And that's what we'll do right now. The next thing I'll do is I'll measure it to 60 centimetres. I think it's about 2 feet, 24 inches. Yeah, it's about 24 inches. Cut it along there, remark it, cut it off, and then I'll use that as a template for the others. Make a little mark. Bring down the blade so you can just see it and cut. So both of these angles are the same, like that. And now I'll just use this as a template going along to cut the other 4. The other 3 legs. Put that one on the end of that one. Make a mark with my pencil. Keep this one as the master, and all I've got to do then is cut it so that that pencil line disappears, then it'll be exactly the same as that one. Leg number 2. Number 3. Well, there we have 4 legs, all cut the same. 15 degrees on the top, 15 degrees on the bottom, meaning that when it sits flat on the ground, it's got a 15-degree lean in towards the sawhorse. Now when you've got both of your legs like so, they'll support the sawhorse like that. Very easy, one cut for the whole lot. We want this whole thing to be as easy as possible. I'm no master carpenter by a very, very long way, so I need to make this thing simple. Keep it super simple, that's my KISS principle. Now it's just a matter of putting those 4 legs onto this T-beam. This is the top bit of the leg. This is the inside top, this is the bit we've got to cut off to match that. So taking the inside part is the bit that we lay down and just put it underneath like that. And we take our little pen and make a mark on there. Put a wiggly line on there like that, so we know which side is which. All we've got to do now is cut from a 15-degree angle from there down that way. And when we've done that, that face will fit perfectly on there, and this edge will tuck up underneath there perfectly. And you'll have full contact all the way around, and that gives it maximum strength. That's the best way of doing it, I've found so far. So that's how the marker works. If in doubt, put your leg down as if it's on the ground. This is the inside. Put the inside up against the inside face of your sawhorse. Rotate it around and just lay it down. Then take your marker, hold it in there like that with your hand. With your marker, just make a marking. And just mark the outside so you know which is the outside and which is the inside, because it's very easy to chop on the wrong side of these and that will mess up your leg. Then, that's number 1 leg. You just rinse and repeat. Do it exactly the same way on each leg. Take that off, hold it, mark it, wiggly line. Batch production, in she goes. Hold it, mark it, wiggly line. Inside edge, hold it, mark it, wiggly line. Just like that. So what I do now is I'll get my little 15-degree template, if you like. I put it on my drop saw and I keep pushing it along until that little edge there lines up with the blade, and it's going to cut that section off just like that. Pop it on there like that. You can just move it up and down until it's in the right spot. This is just to have a look. No, too far. Keep moving it around until you've got it right. This is what I do. Fraction more. And once I'm just about there, I'll put a clamp on it. Just lightly, just to stop it from moving. Around there. Line it up with that 15-degree cut. Make sure it's okay. Just go along a little bit. More. Okay, now I'm going to make a little test cut, and that little test cut, I'm just going to nick it. I'm just going to bring the blade down so it just nicks it on there, just to make sure it's in the right place. If it's not in the right place, I haven't ruined all the work. I can just simply adjust my little clamp block until it is in the right place, and then I can make a full depth cut. So I'll just do that now. Make sure it's hard up against that 15-degree angle. Hold it quite tightly. So there's my little test cut right there. And you can see that the blade is right on the edge of where I did my mark. That is 15 degrees, which will give us the correct splay for our leg. I'll cut that right off now. I'm quite confident that's going to be fine. Make sure it's up against there nicely. And off we go. So there we are, full depth cut, 15 degrees. So that is now flat, and that will sit up against our T-piece, just like that. That gives full surface contact, both underneath the top part and up against the actual T itself. And once we've glued and screwed that, it's actually going to be very, very strong. So we just do that now to all 4 legs. Now that our template is cut and put in place, it's simply a matter of where we made our mark, put each one on and just chop it off. Don't have to worry about it. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. There's number 4. So you can see from that the longest time is actually setting up this little bit of wood and getting it exactly in the right place. It's actually quite quick to do the chopping. And if you didn't have a drop saw, you could do the same thing with a handsaw and just cut it off with a handsaw. Just mark it and just chop it straight off. It'd be quite easy. That's our legs ready to go. That's how easy that is. All we've got to do now, glue and screw the legs on. And we're more or less almost finished. Number 4. Okay, so all that remains to do now that we've cut all of our legs and we've got our T-piece assembled, glued and screwed together, is simply to glue and screw our legs to the T-piece itself. And when we do that, we go right to the end of the upright T-piece so that the legs are right next to it. So all we've got to do then, well, what I like to do first actually, because this can sometimes get a little bit awkward. So what I'll first do, I've got 6 screws here. These are specially treated for use with preserved timber, otherwise you put normal screws in there, they just rot away. So these are a special screw. I get these because I work with this type of timber quite a lot. So what I'll generally do, if you take that sort of surface area there, is I'll put 3 screws in it. I'll do this before I start gluing because I've got to hold the leg and screw it at the same time for a quick and easy assembly method. And that's just awkward to do when your glue is going off and all that kind of thing. So what I'll do first is I'll do 1 high and 2 low. So that's 1 up the top in the centre, about 1 inch down. You can see it's quite difficult and wobbly and quite annoying. If it gets overly annoying, I'm going to put it on the floor and do it, and put my foot on it. But I'll put 1 in the centre, just until it bites in, and then 2 slightly down from that. Like that, so they're well engaged, they're right into the wood, and then I can just screw them in with 1 hand. The most important thing when you put the screws in is that these are actually angled down a little bit. I want them to go kind of straight in like that. But it's actually quite awkward with that. That's fine having it like that, by the way, it's no great difficulty. All I have to do now, flip it over, and on that clean surface there, I'll put a bit of glue on there, hold it in place, screw it on. A bit of glue, probably on there. Use the old finger rubber, on he goes, just like that. You don't need much glue, it just makes the joint a bit stronger, that's all. On like that, wipe that on there. Yeah. All I do now, line that up with the end and screw it on. Just like that. then you just rinse and repeat. You do the same thing with the other one. Lovely. Clamps off. And we're half done. Flip him over. Clamp it down again. The clamps just help it to stop moving around, because if you're working in isolation, you haven't got anybody to hold it still for you. Clamps are a workshop's best friend, I reckon. The third hand in the workshop apart from a vise. This will hold this still while I'm working on it, and that just really helps me out. So take my two other legs, and it's exactly the same thing again. We pre-screw our screws in. Get another 6 screws out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another 6 screws, and repeat on the same 2 legs as before. So that it'll hold it firm, but they're not sticking out of here, because if they're sticking out of there, I won't be able to locate that properly down on there. These are only put in there to make it easier for me for when I want to screw it on, because I'll be holding this with one hand, I'll be holding my battery drill with the other hand. So we're back at the glue. Nice big dog, finger spreader, round she goes. You can put a bit on there if you want. And we screw the legs on. Again, we locate it up under here, up under there, and onto our T-piece, onto our T-slot. Just using a finger to make sure that that's perfectly lined up there, and that's lined up nicely there. Hold it still. You can feel that it's located. And then, good hard push, in with our screw. 1, 2, 3. And it doesn't have to be perfect. This isn't fancy joinery, it's not cabinet making. Line him up on the end, make sure it's all square. You can feel when it's right. It just lays there perfectly when it's correct. Nice push. Screw number 1. Screw number 2. Screw number 3. And we're almost done. We've got our legs on now. All that remains to be done now is to fix a gusset to each end for strength. And our little sawhorse will be ready for action. There's our 4 legs on. Underneath our T-beam. This is my unique design, extremely strong. This piece here is the surface on which you lay anything you want, but it's this piece here that gives it its structural strength. It's like a piece of angle iron. This piece under here will stop this piece on top from bowing. If I was just to have that one piece there with 4 legs on it, when I put it down and put weight on that, it would start to bow. But this piece under here gives it structural strength, because when it's that way, it won't bow, and that's what's holding this up. Plus it's a location point for the legs. Plus also, look, it's light as anything. It's not much lighter than those horrible ones that they make out of those pipes that just keep falling over all the time. This will not fall over, and it can take a tremendous amount of weight. So the next thing we're going to do is put our gussets on out of that same material that I measured in from here before. And that's going to line our gussets up perfectly on the outside, and it will allow one to stack on top of the other, and I'll tell you about that once we come to making our gussets. Sawhorse. He's horsome. When we want to come to stack our sawhorses one on top of the other sawhorse legs have to fit over the top of here. So we know that this on top of here is 70 mil, or about 3 inches. So it has to fit, the other one has to fit in here. So we come down, down, down until 3 inches fits in there. And that mark is about here. And then we simply measure from underneath the top down to there, and we can see that is about 160 millimeters, about 160. So with our gussets, I've already pre-cut sort of the roughly cut gussets. If we put that underneath there, do the rough edge up the top. If we put that under there, and then we mark it on this side and cut that mark off, the distance in here, because our other one is going to be sitting right on the edge of the top of there. In other words, this little bit here is represented by that, and then the other legs are going to hang down either side. That's how I work it out. It's the distance that I have to have clearance from right here, measured down so that it'll fit in there. And we can tell that with a bit of wood. We can tell this is going to be right with a bit of wood. That's the top of the next one underneath it. So you see it's got just enough clearance, and that's how we work it out. So all we've got to do now is take our little gusset, which is oversized for this piece here, centralise it so that it pokes out all around, as this one does, all the way down the leg on this side and this side, a little bit further over. Hold it tightly up underneath, mark it from the back with our pencil or a pen or whatever else you've got, mark it on the other side, like that with a pencil. And that way you're measuring off the actual piece you're going to use it on. So there's no complex angles, there's no complex measurements. It's all very easy. You just take this piece, measure off that piece, mark it, chop off the outside areas. We'll mark those, chop them off, chop off that bit there, chop those two pieces off, and that will screw straight onto there with a bit of glue. We do the same for the other end. So that bit goes on that end. Exactly the same up this end. We find that point at which it will have complete coverage, hold it on quite firmly, make our marks on either side, like that. Make sure we know which is the waste piece, which of those pieces there. That should equate to 15 degrees on each side. So, because we're working back off that same dimension, because it's all relative to each other, and that's what makes this type of sawhorse so easy. You've only got one measurement to remember. It just cut everything at 15 degrees and it all just comes together perfectly. So we go back to our drop saw. You don't have to use a drop saw. You can use, you could for instance put that in a vise. If you had a hand saw, you could clamp that in a vise and just chop it off a little bit outside that line. And then once you've screwed it onto your sawhorse, you can just rub it down or plane it off or do whatever you want with it. Take that little sharp edge off. But in this case, I can set my drop saw to 15 degrees and just whack it off. Both sides, you must. Put your finger in your ear, this is going to get loud. Like that, you can just chop it straight off. Turn it round to the other side, chop the other one off. Bin. And there we are, there's a gusset, there's a perfect gusset for the end. Just repeat with our other one. .15 degrees on the other side. Done. There you go. In less than a minute we've cut both of our gussets. They are now ready for assembly onto our sawhorse. All that happens now is I usually stand it on its end like that. Take my little gusset, just offer it up to the wood like that. Sometimes you might have to flip it over to get it just right. Fits perfectly on there. So once I'm happy with that, I'll get my glue up the leg and in the middle there. Use my finger spreader, spread the glue out a little bit like that. Lovely. then just get my battery drill with some more screws and just screw it on. That gives it extra strength and stability. When it comes to the gussets, I usually put 5 screws in it. I put one in the centre, in the long grain of that T-piece. If I can get it to start. Before it's gone all the way through, I'll push from this end to make sure it's located right up against the end. Like that. Then I put on the 2 outside ones. Because there's only 1 screw in it, that can pivot left and right. So just check with my fingers and my thumbs just to make sure it's exactly lined up with both of those legs. It is. So I'll pop a screw just a little back in the centre, a little way back. Just below surface so they're not sticking out. You're not going to scratch yourself on them later on or anything like that. Two more, one up there. And one over there. And that's that gusset done. Once we've done that gusset, just simply flip the whole thing over, plonk it back down on the floor, go through the same process again, line him up. If it doesn't look right, flip it over. No, it was better the first time, flip it over that way. That's just how I want it, like that. Bit of glue. Finger spread up. Spread the glue out like that. Nice. Gusset on, screw. Again, I'll put one directly down through the long grain of the T-piece, right in the centre there. Come on. Pushing it hard up against that edge there, it's shifted a little bit. Just make sure, before you commit to driving that screw home, just make sure it's right in the centre. That's what I always do, get it right in the middle. Two down the end. And that, essentially, is our sawhorse assembled. T-piece, 4 legs at 15 degrees, a gusset on either end, and that is very, very strong. You can put a fair bit of weight on that. I'm a fair bit of weight, I'm about to put me on it. You won't be breaking that in a hurry. And so, this is the finished product. A simple, easy to make, sturdy, cost-effective and long-lasting sawhorse. Total cost for this build is around $15 Australian in January the 1st, 2019. The store-bought version is $18.50. This is $3.50 cheaper than the one you can buy in the store, with all materials included, and it will last 20 times longer. And here's another one that I've also made, and that will stack straight on top of that one. Put them away somewhere until you require them. And when you do require them, you can use them for whatever else you usually normally use a sawhorse for. Put something on them, stack things, paint things on them. I use mine for all sorts of things. You're always finding something new that you can use your sawhorses for. And so that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a crack at making one of these. No need to buy that store-bought stuff. It's a simple, easy product, cost-effective. It doesn't cost very much. It only takes about half an hour to make one. And very limited tools. I've only used a compound miter saw to cut that 15-degree angle, and my battery drill and a little bit of glue. And that's all I've used. So if you've got that equipment, you don't even need that drop saw. You can use a hand saw, just cut it to 15 degrees and measure it. So there you go. A simple, easy project for you to do at home in your workshop. Good luck.
That was the first bit. Good. So that's actually the wrong one. This is the 15-degree cut. Just around.
So, cost effective, doesn't cost very much. It only takes about half an hour to make one.